face of tyranny.
I want to welcome everyone back to tonight's special broadcast of the Kev Baker Show right here on your favourite alternative media network, www.truthfrequencyradio.com. I keep saying it all the time, but wherever you are, you better be making it TFR. We really are on the rise right now, folks. And it's due to that rise, and to all you listeners out there, that we're able to ask people like our following guest onto the show. So, less from me. Let's get into it. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Gerald Celente. Okay, tonight, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to say that we're joined by Mr. Gerald Celente. Now, Mr. Gerald Celente is the publisher of the world-renowned Trends Journal, and you can find his work over at trendsresearch.com. Mr. Celente, a big, huge, warm welcome to the Kev Baker Show. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on.
It's an absolute pleasure. Now, I had the privilege of reading over your latest Trends Journal. Now, in there, I see you were actually talking about Obama at great length. Now, you were saying that he's possibly going to lead America into World War III. What do you mean by that, Gerald?
Well, you can see the steps that they've been taking. Let's not forget, this is a Nobel Peace Prize winner. The man that unilaterally started the Libyan war. They call it a humanitarian mission. They overthrew a government, a sovereign government. And when you look now, we're back in Iraq under the guise of another humanitarian mission. We got to save those Yazidis on the mountain. Everybody knows what a Yazidi is and how precious they are. And, of course, the Christians on the mountain. But when the Christians in ancient Syrian villages were getting slaughtered, that was okay. But now we got to get ISIS because ISIS is doing it. And then, of course, anybody that has the desire, the will, or the courage, all they have to go is onto YouTube and type in the name Victoria Nuland, N-U-L-A-N-D, December 13th, 2013, and there she is, our Assistant Secretary of State at the National Press Club in Washington, brought to you by, over her left shoulder, Chevron, over her right shoulder, Exxon, talking about why the path for Ukraine is with Europe and why Ukraine should follow the path set forth by the International Monetary Federation. Now, here's the American Secretary of State also caught on audio tape with the ambassador, American ambassador to Ukraine in February of 2014, Jeffrey Pyatt, talking about the overthrow and how they were going to do it of the Yanukovych government of Ukraine. So now you have Obama and the American media and most of the Western media condemning Russia for what the United States and NATO have transpired, have invented, have initiated, and they're blaming Russia for the destabilization, and it's working. Because the latest polls out show that Putin is the greatest threat to the world equity markets, and ISIS comes in second, and then bringing up a far third is Ebola.
And the thing is, over here in the UK, Mr. Celente, we're told every second day about Russian bombers all over Europe, yet they never mention the fact that it was NATO encroaching on Russia's Western Front, basically, that started all this. And then you can go back even to Syria, where Putin was the stumbling block for the actual failed chemical attack blamed on it was Assad's forces, but it turned out to be probably the guys we now know as ISIS. Are they determined to get a war going with Russia?
They're psychopaths, and nobody wants to call them what they are. Look at these people. How many more wars do they have to start? How many more people do they have to kill before people will call them who they are? I mean, you remember you had Cameron shooting his mouth off about how Gaddafi has to go. You had Blair over there shooting his mouth off about Saddam Hussein having weapons of mass destruction and ties to Al-Qaeda. You had Sarkozy starting the Libyan war, and Hollande now trumping it up in Syria, and now they're all back into Iraq. So what we're looking at while we're saying Obama has this way about him, as psychopaths do, to be very calm and very collected while they're doing the con job. Again, how many more people do Americans and the Europeans have to slaughter before they call it murder? And going back, to the other issues that you were mentioning about the reaction of Russia from NATO's encroachment. People have, attention deficit disorder. When the Soviet Union collapsed, the deal was clear as day, etched in stone, that the Soviets would give Eastern Germany back to Germany. And as the agreement for that, NATO would not expand any further than it was. And then Bill Clinton, Slick Willie, he broached that one, and he started pushing further and further into Eastern Europe. And then little Georgie Bush kept it going. So now you have U.S. flights, military flights in Estonia. Could you imagine if the Russians were in Canada and Mexico? Hey, how about the Cuban Missile Crisis? But no, it's okay for the Europeans to go into what was formerly Russian territory. So when you're talking about Ukraine and how the way Putin's reacting, and here's the thing, Kevin, John, that blow me away. What imbecile that has a brain between their ears thinks that little boy Cameron, baby cakes Hollande, or BS Obama is going to beat the Russians? If Napoleon couldn't pull it off, if Hitler, who launched the greatest military offensive in world history, couldn't pull it off, how could a bunch of military losers who can't win in Afghanistan, who can't win in Iraq, and who can't win in Libya going to beat the Russians?
Well, Gerald, obviously Putin getting the blame for everything now. We've had, the White House press lackeys tell us that separatists fired the rocket at MH17, even citing YouTube videos as evidence, which is amazing. But the British press at the time, they were going absolutely tonto and coming up with headlines like, Putin killed my son. Now, Russia's just released satellite images, allegedly, of a Ukrainian jet firing a missile. So what's your take on this latest evidence, if true, would shut this lot up for a while?
Where's the evidence from the United States? They're watching everything that everybody does, and they can't come up with any footage or satellite images of this? That's what it'll take. And they're not doing it. Again, I remember how this whole thing unfolded. I remember the day very well, because it was the same day that the other mass murderers, Israel, launched the attack against Gaza. So while the media was focused on the downing of the Malaysian airliner over Ukraine, Netanyahu launched the attack against Gaza. And that didn't hardly made the news until probably it started generating news about a week and a half later. So he used that as a cover-up. But immediately we heard from the American vice president, we heard from the American media and the Western media, that Russian separatists shot it down without one bit of proof. Just like what Kev was saying about the reports coming in about, Russian tanks and Russian this inside of Ukraine. And in this age of selfies, how about showing me some photos? No, we can't show you any because that's intelligence. Yeah, we'd be giving up our intelligence. Yeah, you have to have no intelligence to believe they're crap. So it is all one big lie. Don't forget, Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and ties to Al-Qaeda. Hey, remember that Gulf of Tonkin incident that started the Vietnam War that never happened? I smoked, but I didn't inhale. I didn't have sex with that woman, Monica Lewinsky. Why would anybody believe they're crap?
And that's the thing, Mr. Celente, because last year, when Obama tried to get boots on the ground and go into Syria the first time, it didn't happen. Yet you add in the Yazidis, and now I read that 73% of Americans actually approve of boots on the ground and more intervention in the Middle East. And it's the same over here in the UK. We've been told it's ISIS this and ISIS that. Do you feel that probably right about now is a very, very strong likelihood we're going to see some kind of false flag to justify further encroachment into Syria?
I would say yes. And not only further encroachment into Syria, but more cause for war. That's all they do, is they keep promoting war, whether false flag or real. Again, I mentioned the lies of the other ones, whether it was going back to Remember the Maine. So, yes, I believe that's what's going to happen. And as you well point out, the people buy it real quick. In the last Trends Journal, the spring edition, I wrote a story, the summer edition rather. I did a story about George Bush's 9/11 speech and the one 9 days later when he took us to war against Afghanistan. And I began it by saying, only a madman would speak these words, and only a nation dumbstruck with fear would believe them. And dumbstruck they were, because 90% of the American public bought the Afghan lie. I broke down his speech, sentence by sentence, not one fact in it, not one. Even a phrase going back to 2001. And a man by the name of Osama bin Laden, a man by the name of, And all of a sudden he became public enemy number one. So the people are very easily led with propaganda, whether it's in the United States, whether it's in the UK, whether it's in Pakistan or Russia, you name the country. Propaganda is a good business to get into. You could do it cheaply and get great results.
And our man over here right now, Moron, as I call him, he's actually shouting about he's worried another financial collapse is on the way. Now, with these markets being so rigged, Mr. Celente, surely they know when the next big collapse is coming. But how do we go about eradicating somewhere like the City of London? We see these LIBOR cases and the latest one about setting interests for currency exchanges. They were fined something like £1 billion. But when you actually look at how much trade they make on the foreign currency desk each day, it's something like $3 trillion. How do you actually go about punishing these people?
Well, actually, it's $5.3 trillion.
Wow.
Yeah, and what it is that there's no consequences for actions anymore. They say that the fish rots from the head down. And when we were talking about the actions of the psychopaths in chief, be they presidents, prime ministers, or chancellors, the people mimic what goes on at the top. That's why they get the saying, the fish rots from the head down. And the financial markets are just another aspect of that, because no longer is there a threat that if you're caught for stealing literally trillions of dollars worth of money, that the consequences are going to be any more than a minimum fine, like you pointed out. That, compared to doing $5.3 trillion a day, and I think the fine was 3.2 trillion, which is, of course, probably about $1.5 billion, 2 billion euros. That's no consequence at all. So there is no punishment for crimes. The only people in fascist dictatorships that we have now, And I don't say that, by the way, to be inflammatory or to be confrontational. I say it as a matter of fact, because fascism is the merger of state and corporate powers, and too big to fail killed capitalism, if there ever was one that killed it. But anyway, under these systems, it's only we the people that pay the price for breaking the minor letter of the law, not dotting an I of it or crossing a T. While the big criminals, like the Tony Blairs, the George Bushes, who start wars based on lies, they get, look at multimillionaire Blair now. Maybe he'll become billionaire Blair. That's how he's rewarded. So in the system of corruption, from the fish rotting from the head down, that's what you're going to see more of. We're coming out with our top trends for 2015. Today, I had a conversation with Dr. Paul Craig Roberts, there's no one that I respect more for geopolitical and economic insights than him. And he was the former Assistant Treasury Secretary under Ronald Reagan. This is a guy that could and did bring in the director of the CIA and question him under oath. We were talking today, he's going to be penning one of the top trends for 2015. And it's going to be about the economy. And you alluded to it earlier when you said about rigging the LIBOR and rigging the Forex. The entire, and why isn't it crashing? How can they keep it going? Do they know it's going to fail? The entire system is rigged. How much more proof do people need? The proof is there that the LIBOR, their interest rates, to the tune of, by the way, since they found out they were rigging them, it's about $700 trillion. The LIBOR is rigged. Gold markets are rigged. I mean, all of a sudden, 3 a.m. in the morning, there's 40,000 shares of, paper gold being sold at a loss. So they're rigging the markets. And think of how easy it is to rig. If George Soros could destroy the pound as he did back then, and that was one man, imagine the central banks working in collusion. So the whole game is rigged. And going back to your first question, they're leading us to war, because that's what happens when all else fails. They take you to war. And the economies have failed. Europe is in a recession by all measurements, even using the fake measurements that the ECB and the European Union put out. They're teetering on it depending what country you're looking at. You look at what's going on in Japan. They just announced that Japan is in a recession. Now, under Abenomics, he dumped the equivalent of 4 times the amount of money that the Federal Reserve dumped in quantitative easing to bail out the United States system in relation to GDPs, ratio to GDPs, as the United States did, and they're in a recession. And now he's upping it by another 60%. So who's benefiting from all this? It's very simple. Again, I'm not making up the numbers. 85 people in the world have as much dough as 3.5 billion people. 85 has as much as half the world's population. That's what the equity markets are doing. That's what all this quantitative easing has accomplished. That's what austerity measures have brought. That's their payoff. They steal from all of us and give to the banks that are nothing more than casinos that gamble. And one of our other top trends for 2015 is going to be bankism, not capitalism. And Nomi Prinz is penning that one. And she's well known for her books on the banking system and the corruption within it.
Sorry, Ken, I was just going to say, how do you fix something that, even if the big fish lost its head, it would just grow another one and carry on the same way?
I think the model to look at, the one that I see that only works, is the Swiss model of direct democracy. And, they have referendums on issues that the people get enough votes for and enough signatures for, and then you put them up for a referendum. And the argument that, well, that's a small country. It doesn't make any difference. 11 people or 111 million people. 11 million or 100, it doesn't make any difference. You're voting on one issue. And if you could bank online, you could vote online. And people say, yeah, but the voting online could be corrupted. Yeah, like it isn't corrupted now. And I would say that it has a better opportunity of not being corrupted if it's open to all public scrutiny. So that you have the greatest geeks watching the algorithms and whatever kind of information is coming out to see in each state, province, wherever, if it's in sync with reality. So for me, what we're doing along those lines, to answer your question, how do you change it? On May 2nd, 2011, we're launching Occupy Peace. And the website's occupypeace.us. This is just a United States initiative. Anybody that wants to do it in their country, knock yourself out. Yeah. But the way we look at it is that we honor thy founding fathers. And each of them, beginning with Washington, a real commander-in-chief, not like this little boy Cameron or Hollande or Obama that couldn't fight their way out of a paper bag. This is a guy that led the troops. His farewell address was no foreign entanglements. Benjamin Franklin, no foreign entanglements. Adams, no foreign entanglements. Jefferson, no foreign entanglements. Adams, no foreign entanglements. And the world was at war back then. So what we're doing with Occupy Peace, other than other rallies, we're going to have takeaways with this. And one of them is going to be a move toward direct democracy. So that any time the nation goes to war and Congress has to vote on it, we'll tell our congressmen in each state the way we, the people, want them to vote. And we want to get referendums on each state ballot to make that possible. And we're calling them Proposition Peace ballots. So, to me, the answer is you have to break the two-headed one-party systems. There's no difference between the Conservatives and Labor Party. There's no difference between Republicans and Democrats. There's no difference between the Bloods and the Crips. They're all murderers and thieves. They steal your money in the name of austerity or too big to fail or tax breaks for their buddies. And they kill millions in the name of freedom, democracy, and humanitarian missions.
So looking forward to 2016, Gerald, who do you think is going to be the new teleprompter-in-chief? Will it be Hitlery or will it be Jeb Bush?
The way it looks now, it's Hitlery. And here's the way I see it lining up. And again, anything could happen, but the way things are now, at this moment, I would say the wild card in this is going to be Rand Paul. And with Rand Paul, it will be very reminiscent to 1992, when Bill Clinton ran against Papa Bush, and Ross Perot was the wild card. Ross Perot got almost 20% of the vote, and he dragged that vote away from George Bush. Rand Paul will drag it away from Jeb Bush if he runs on a third ticket. And Rand Paul at this point, doesn't have a shot because of and the same reason his father didn't. It's the abortion issue. You have these guys telling other people what they should do with their bodies, and that's offensive to a lot of women, particularly. And issues like that and the drug issues are going to be real big negatives for him. And besides that, he's a two-faced little boy, a guy born on third base and thought he hit a triple. This is a guy that came out and said no more foreign aid for Israel until AIPAC. He couldn't take the hot air from AIPAC. Little Randy crumbled, man. Okay, no foreign aid except for Israel. Another coward. They're cowards. There's not a man or a woman among them. So it looks like more of the same. The dynasty keeps going on. But again, anything could happen between now and then. You know, we could see an internet candidate pop up, and that could well happen. So the field is wide open. By the way, we had midterm elections here in the States, as you know. 36% of the people turned out. Well, otherwise, 74% of the people stayed home. Didn't want to be a part of a charade.
That's exactly what it is, Mr. Celente, and I want to thank you for your time tonight. And you know, the Americans maybe could do a lot worse than a Gerald Celente running for president over there. I tell you that.
I'll go for that.
Exactly, you seem to have your head screwed on, Mr. Celente. Again, I want to thank you for joining the Kev Baker Show, and hopefully we can have you on again sometime in the future, sir.
I would love to. Thank you so much, and thank you for all that you're doing.
And thank all of you out there for listening to that interview. I hope you enjoyed that. Mr. Celente will be coming back soon. And wherever you are, keep it TFR.
You didn't touch that dial.
Peace! And great interview, by the way.
And stay tuned for Joe Joseph and Popeye. Don't turn that dial.
We think first of vague words that are synonyms for progress and pair them with footage of a high-speed train. Science is doing lots of stuff that may or may not have anything to do with us. See how this guy in a lab coat holds up a beaker? That means we do research. But we also do business in the USA, or want you to think we do. Check out this wind energy thing in Indiana, and this blue-collar guy with dirt on his face. Lest you think we're a faceless entity, look at all these attractive people. Using a specific ratio of Asian people to black people to women to white men, we want to make sure we represent your needs and interests, or at least a version of your skin color in our ads. Did we put a baby in here? Yep.